Feeling like your money has a mind of its own? Stressing about groceries, dinners, or that daily coffee that breaks the bank? Let me just tell you, you're not alone. And today on Ask Ralph Live, we're tackling 6 practical habits that can put you back in control and bring peace to your finances. Plus, I'm answering your questions live, so stick around. It's going to be a game changer. Hey everyone, just wanted to share some exciting news about what's coming soon. In the next few weeks, you're going to see our show, currently called Ask Ralph, getting a fresh new look and a name that I believe really speaks to what we're all about. We're going to be transitioning to Financially Confident Christian. And don't worry, it's still me, Ralph, and we'll still be bringing you that same practical, faith-based financial guidance every day to help you tackle debt, to help you build savings and grow your business and truly break free from the financial shame with confidence. And alongside the new name, you'll also see some brand new artwork, so keep an eye out for that. I am really excited about this next step and how Financially Confident Christian better reflects our mission together. I'll have more details coming soon. Hey everyone, and welcome to Ask Ralph Live. I'm your host, Ralph, and it's fantastic to be with you on this Tuesday at lunchtime. Thanks for joining in. And Craig, thank you for joining me as usual. My good friend, Craig. Welcome to the show, Craig.
Thanks for having me on again, Ralph.
Oh, you're welcome. And we're hoping the audio is coming through without any echoes. And I apologize to the audience for last week. That was a trip, but we made it through. So for those of you who listen to the daily podcast, you know we've been walking through some really practical action steps. And today we're doing a bit of a recap, a chance to dive a bit deeper into 6 key topics we covered during our journey. We're going to touch on using the cash envelope system, the sanity saver of meal planning, the discipline of grocery list, why a weekly money check-in is crucial, and figuring out needs versus wants, and the surprising financial punch of that daily coffee habit. We've got some great listener questions lined up for each of these topics so we can really dig in and make these principles stick. My goal today, as what it usually is to help you move from just knowing the ideas to confidently applying them in your own life, all while keeping our faith at the center. So grab your lunch if you haven't already, settle in, and let's get started. All right, well, first up, let's talk about cash envelopes. We discussed this as a powerful tool for gaining control over those tricky budget categories. You know, the ones like groceries and eating out or entertainment, where it's so easy to overspend without realizing it. The idea here is pretty simple. Choose one category, label an envelope, put your budgeted cash amount for the week in that envelope or for your pay period for that matter, and only spend what's in the cash envelope for purchases. And when, it's nothing magic here, but when the cash is gone, the spending stops until the next refill. And the key benefit to that was its tangibility. You physically see your money dwindling, which makes you more mindful than just swiping a card. It's got a built-in stopping point. Now, this generated some really practical questions from listeners, and I got this one from Brenda. So let me get to our first question here, Craig. And this one comes to us from Brenda. And Brenda says, Ralph, using cash feels inconvenient and maybe even a bit unsafe these days compared to my debit card. Is it really necessary if I track my spending carefully with my card? Well, Brenda, let me say that's a super valid concern. That's true, and it's one I hear a lot. And you're right, cash can feel less convenient, and we should always be mindful of safety. But Craig, what do you think about question here from Brenda to get started?
No, I'm with her. Cash has a lot of downsides. It's got some upsides too. Like if you don't have it, you can't spend it. But that's really not practical for most people. You know, if you're in a service industry, working at a place that only takes cash, maybe. But I wonder, couldn't you just put an index card in the envelope? And at the end of every day, go through and subtract out whatever you've got. I mean, it's kind of the same idea. The envelope thing really just forces you to budget, and then it forces some discipline on your spending. So there are ways you can do that with a debit card or a credit card or whatever it is that you use to spend your money.
I agree with you. And here's my take, Craig. If you're meticulously tracking your debit card spending and you're consistently staying within your budget for all the categories, then maybe cash envelopes aren't strictly necessary for every area of your life. But there is a truth that many of us, there's often at least one or two specific categories, what I call the budget busters, where we consistently go over those things despite our best intentions with tracking. And that's where I think the cash envelope system really shines, because then it's more of a what I'll call a targeted intervention and a behavioral tool. That physical act, and this is the part that I think we can talk a little bit about, Craig, is I still think there's value. I can remember when I was a little kid, right? And I would go to my grandparents for the weekend or something. And my grandfather, before we were walking out the door, would dig into his pocket and he'd pull out like a $5 bill, right? And he'd take it and kind of stretch it and snap it. And he'd go, here you go, here's $5 for you. Well, you know what? As a kid, like I remember that $5, it was harder to spend that $5 because it was some tangibility to it, and there was that actual cash. It's so easy to see it in a credit card. Craig, what do you think about that? Do you think I've off my rocker on that one?
No, I think it's right. I mean, it still bothers me to break a $20 bill, because once you break it, it's gone.
Well, that's
You've got that $20, that $50 bill, whatever it is. But man, once it gets into those smaller bills, it's so easy to spend on small things that feel like they're nothing, but that add up. Yeah, I don't know. It's a tough question, because you and I grew up with cash, but my students, they don't carry cash. A lot of them don't carry wallets. They've got their phone, they've got a couple of credit cards, debit card in there, and their ID, and that's it. And so I think you have to adapt the principle to whatever works for your life. And so if it's cash, maybe you do that for a while. If it's an index card in an envelope, if it's a spreadsheet, whatever works. But the point is, you got to start doing something if you want to get control of your spending.
I agree with you, Craig. And I think this is one of those, and this is going to sound like kind of a mean thing. It's kind of like when you first started riding a bike. I remember having the training wheels on the back, right? You put those wheels on the back because it gave you some stability in the back. And I remember, my dad out there on the sidewalk. All right, you can do this, and he pushed me a little ways, and I go maybe 3 or 4 feet, and then I go to the side and catch that side training wheel, and then I go a little bit farther and catch the other side. And I think the cash envelope system in a lot of ways is kind of like training wheels, because it gives you a systemic way to look at it. There's a system you can use. And I think there's value in that, but I agree with you, Craig. And the truth is, I've been to places now where if you try to pay with cash, they look at you like you've lost your mind. Like, ever since COVID, we don't take cash. Yeah. And that's a real thing. And I guess I'm a little disconnected, because you're right, my age is kind of showing here, because I still remember the days, like my dad used to own service stations when I was a kid, and he dealt with a lot of cash. And I remember as a kid, like he'd go in his pocket, he'd do this like, like flip out the cash. And, and that was just the way he did business. But you're right, today, I don't know how many times clients come in and they'll say to me, well, do you take my phone for a payment? I'm looking at them like, yeah, I guess we can do that. But I guess you're right, Craig. But it all comes down to keeping track of it. And I think that, I like your idea of an index card. I understand there's some kind of like online way to do these envelopes. I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but I think the big picture, and Brenda, this goes along with what you were saying, I think it allows you to change that mindset shift. And I think it's what we're really trying to do. Is we're trying to change our mindset and really allocate those things into those buckets or those envelopes for what it's worth. And listen, my grandparents used to use this. And I remember as a kid, like I was like, my grandfather would be like, well, I guess we're not going fishing today because my fishing envelope is empty. And, he'd kind of go over to my grandmother and say, hey, can we borrow from this budget or from this envelope? I want to take now look, nobody else calls me this. My grandparents used to call me Ralphie, right? So if anybody says that as an adult, I'm like, what do you know? But he's like, I'm going to take Ralphie fishing. So, but I just think there's value in it, Craig. But you're right. I never even thought about with your students now, they don't even carry cash.
No. Well, here's a little idea. I wonder if you couldn't set up a separate account with a separate debit card or Cash App or whatever, where you put that discretionary spending in that account. I mean, my first wife and I used to do that. She was very meticulous. If our bank accounts didn't balance to the penny, she would have a meltdown. I mean, just really, she was very precise like that. Well, I didn't keep track of that kind of thing. So what we finally did is we had an account, and I'd put, I don't know, $200 or $300 a month in that account. And then when I wanted cash, I'd go hit that account on the ATM, and I only had to take her receipts when I put more money in that account. And it worked out great. So I don't know why you couldn't do the same thing. have a separate account with a separate debit card or whatever, where you've got that $200 a month or whatever for that, whatever that problem area is, whatever that discretionary spending is. So I think the point is you can adapt the idea,
I agree
to
with you, and
whatever works for you.
I think that's a splendid idea, Craig. I love it because the whole point is keeping track and accountability. Well, let's move on to our next day that I talked about. We tackled that daily stress of figuring out what's for dinner. I don't know about you, Craig, but like I get this from my wife sometimes, and how often that leads to that costly takeout or wasted food. And we talked about this idea of meal planning, deciding your meals, especially dinners for the week ahead before you hit the grocery store. And this really involves a couple things, checking your schedule, picking some reasonably simple meals. Listen, my wife is the one that cooks. If I'm cooking, we're going out or we're ordering out for sure. But, and seeing what ingredients you already have on hand. And when I did the show this past week, the benefits are huge because it drastically reduces that 5 p.m. panic. It saves you a ton of money on those impulse restaurant meals and the last minute grocery runs, and significantly cuts the cost down on food waste because I don't know about you and your family, Craig, but a lot of times if we're not being cognizant of planning those things, my wife will go buy stuff and I'll be, hey, let's go get something to eat for dinner. She's like, but Ralph, I bought this for this day. I bought this for this day, which actually led us to a question we got from Mark. And Mark sent this. He said, I tried a meal plan, Ralph, but sticking to it is hard. Things change during the week. My schedule gets upended and then I feel like a failure if I don't follow the plan exactly. How flexible should I be? Well, Mark, you've hit the nail on the head for so many people. That feeling of needing to stick to the plan perfectly can actually be a setup for frustration. Hey, Craig, I don't know about you, but anytime that you try to put yourself into this rigid plan, and you're going to feel like a failure if you don't do it. But the truth is a meal plan is a guide. It doesn't need to be this rigid prison sentence. Life happens, Craig. What do you think?
Yeah, a plan is a plan. It's not a set of laws. So yeah, I'm absolutely with Mark on this one. It just, you made the plan up, you can break the plan, but that's within your power. But I want to give you a little twist on this. Do you think maybe it's a bit too far to plan out every day? So maybe you plan out 4 days a week or 3 days a week or 5 days a week, and then leave yourself a little flexibility. You might have leftovers. You might decide you want to go out. You might decide you're tired and you just want a sandwich. That happens a lot around my house. I'm too tired to eat, but I'm going to eat something. So I'm kind of with you. These really rigid plans are a bad idea. They're just plans. They're just plans. They are not laws.
I agree with you, Craig. And one of the notes I put here when we talked about this particular call was, you got to figure out how to build flexibility. And I love what you said. Maybe you plan by doing 4 or 5 dinners for the week. Leave a couple of nights for leftovers or a super simple, a pantry raid. I'll be careful what I say there, but a pantry raid,
Yes.
And then, a meal like breakfast for dinner or pasta with a quick sauce or even a planned budget for a takeout meal if that fits your lifestyle and budget. I think there's all things you got to build into it. And you also have to have 1 or 2 incredibly easy backup meal ideas on hand. I think that's important.
And that's an absolutely critical point with all of this is if you have some staples that you can turn to when either your plan didn't work out or you don't feel like eating what you had in the plan. Boxes of pasta, some jars of pretty good sauce, that kind of thing. You can throw together something really quickly that tastes good. It's got decent nutrition. It's not too expensive. And to our friend Mark Lawley's point, which is not the Mark here, you can rotate through those staples. And if you have some sort of a natural disaster, if you've got cans and jars and dry goods, you're in good shape. So I think if you have some things, whatever it is that you like for me, it's pasta. Guess what mine was in grad school?
I'm going to say, was it ramen noodles?
It was not. You're close.
Okay.
You're in the right family. So I ate pasta 4 nights, 5 nights a week because it's the ultimate bachelor meal.
Right.
You need 1 pot, 1 plate, 1 fork, and in a pinch, you don't even really need the plate. So I would eat that a lot. And then yellow rice. I love yellow rice. And you can put just about anything into some frozen vegetables, chop up some ham, a little bacon, whatever you've got. So I think if you plan ahead that way, not just plan, I'm going to have this meal on this day, but I'm going to have these things in my cupboard or in my fridge. And then if I don't have time to go with the original plan or just don't feel like it, I've got this other thing that keeps me from doing, Uber Eats or DoorDash or, those kind of things just get expensive quickly. So I think that's a decent twist that might help Mark.
I agree with you. And the Mark you were talking about is practicalprepping.info. He's got a great podcast, and I would highly recommend it. And he talks about this all the time, shop your own pantry. But really the goal here is the habit of planning. That's what we're talking about here. We're just trying to reduce that stress and reduce that overspending. We're not looking for perfect execution every single day because, things can happen. Your kids get sick, or maybe you need to scrap Tuesday's planned meal because you need something quicker. Something came up, but you still save money and stress on the other days because you've got a plan. So one of the things I'm going to say to Mark is give yourself some grace, dude. Focus on the overall reduction in the chaos and cost, not on this idea of flawless adherence, because any plan is better than no plan. My son's in the Coast Guard, my oldest son. He says this all the time. He says there's a 5 P things or perfect plan. I don't know it off the top of my head, but but he says this all the time, is like to not have a plan at all. But we're trying to build that habit. So I think that's really a valid point.
I know what it is. My dad started in the Coast Guard.
Oh, here we go.
Prior planning prevents poor performance.
Well, I think
that's it. Yeah,
no, and you came through, so now I don't feel so bad because my son will go back and listen to this because I think he's out on the boat right now. But he'll go back and listen. Dad, you should have known that. So I don't want to
tell him it was a setup to make me look smart and feel good about myself. You just tell him that.
I will tell him that. Well, Craig, the next thing we talked about was building directly on that meal planning. Our next action step was about conquering the grocery store itself. So once you've got that meal plan, the solution is to make a detailed grocery list based only on the ingredients you need for those meals, plus any of those essential staples, and then really commit to sticking to that list. No more wandering the aisles. And the key benefit here was control. Again, we're talking about control. It helps you avoid those tempting impulse buys and ensures you don't forget crucial items, which means fewer frustrating return trips. And most importantly, it keeps your grocery spending aligned with your budget. And I'm going to tell you right now, that's not an easy thing to do. And this brought up some common shopping dilemmas. And this question came to us from Susan. And Susan wrote this. She says, what about amazing sales, Ralph? If something I use all the time, like my favorite pasta sauce, is half price, but it wasn't on my list for this particular week, should I grab it? Well, Susan, that's a classic shopper's question. And it really requires what I'll call some discernment. On the one hand, sticking strictly to the list is fantastic for building that discipline, especially when you're first trying to get spending under control. Craig, I know you said you lived on pasta and sauce, so if you saw the sale on pasta, I guess you would have probably grabbed it, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. And did many times. If they had a 2-for-1 on my favorite pasta, I would snatch it up. But I wouldn't do that on things that I didn't regularly buy. So I think that's really the key in Susan's question. If it is something you use all the time, then sure, why not? Assuming that it fits within your budget for that week. You can go crazy on this. So I eat granola and yogurt all the time. I had it for breakfast and lunch today. And the blueberry yogurt was on sale when my wife went to the grocery store yesterday. So she picked up extra. I mean, why wouldn't you? But the problem is it's a little bit of a slippery slope. So yeah, the cookies that I like are 2-for-1. So why shouldn't I get some cookies? Well, are you really going to buy those cookies every week or whatever it is? And so you do have to have a little bit of discipline here, but you're adults with agency. You get to do what you want. And if it seems like the right thing to do, buy it. If it's something that, I'm not so sure if I'll eat this. We've thrown away a lot of food because one of us decided, oh, this is on sale. It'd be good for sometime this week. And then it, ends up in the weekly trash. So you got to be a little careful about that sort of thinking.
Yeah, and I think the other thing you got to be careful of, and this is one of my personal pet peeves, these big box like the Costco's and the Sam's Clubs, The thing is, people go in there, oh, there's such a great deal. But the problem is, like, I can remember going there, and it's been a couple months ago, but I think it was croissants, right? These croissants, they smelled great. I mean, the thing is, you got to understand. When you go into the grocery store or when you go into one of these, I can't think of what they're called, like these big box places, where you can, the wholesale clubs, you got to understand something. These are marketing people's dreams. Like their goal is to have you spend every last dollar before you leave the store. And I'm not criticizing that. We live in capitalism. That's fantastic. But you got to understand something. They set the stores up for you to overspend. And one of my pet peeves is I see people, they fill up their cars. Well, I was talking about these croissants. Well, these croissants smell great. First of all, as a diabetic, I probably shouldn't be eating croissants. But I said, these things smell great. But the problem is you go over, well, I'll get a couple of them. You can't get a couple of them. It's like 24 of them. Now, first of all, I love croissants, but I don't need to eat 24 of them. And secondarily, if I learn how to, manage my food well, you can't freeze them. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying, Craig?
Right.
So the problem is you can get yourself into a problem. Yeah, it sounds good that there's a sale or there's these big. That's the problem with these big, the big wholesale clubs. Yeah, they have their place, but who needs 50 pounds of rice?
Right.
Who needs, it's things that are staples. And that's what I was going to say here, in response to Susan is if it's truly a staple used well before it expires, sure, that's fine. But if it's something that might go bad or you're going to get tired of, it doesn't make a lot of sense to overdo it. Now, again, Mark from Practical Prepping would say, have your pantry closet. But the other big takeaway from this show, Craig, what I was trying to get people to do was really look at what do you already have? What's in your pantry? What's in your freezer? Because it's so easy if you don't have that list to go, well, I better pick that up. And then you get home, you're like, well, I got 5 of those. Or, why didn't I use this up? It's getting ready to expire. I think that's the key. I'm sorry, it seemed like you had something
Well, I was going to say my wife just went through our pantry, getting rid of things that we're never going to eat. It was shocking. I'm not going to, I can't put a hard number on it, but it would surprise me if it was less than several $100s worth of food that one or the other of us bought thinking, oh, this will be good. This will be good. And she's already donated it. So,
and I think that's where the key is. That's why I put these 2 shows kind of back to back is let's talk about the meal planning first. And then we talk about developing that list because I think it's so crucial that, listen, the truth of the matter is you go to the grocery store. I think this is a pretty fair thing to say. It's about 30% more than what it cost a couple of years ago. Well,
it's a lot.
If you're struggling, which, listen, all of us are struggling at some level. We talked about this on the show many times. But if you have a plan, if you've got like we talked about the whole idea of having a plan, if you start to think through that and you have that plan before you go to the store, because here's the thing, like a lot of people don't want to talk about this. When you go into the grocery store, the people that do the marketing there, they are geniuses. They understand what to put at the end cap. They understand what to put in certain aisles. So when I did this show, Craig, I even talked about, be strategic in making your list by where the stuff is in the store. Because it's so easy to get distracted. I'll give you an example of this. The lady that does some massage therapy for me and my wife, she was talking about her husband's got this habit now. He goes to the grocery store every day, which sounds good. You're getting, fresher food potentially. But she said I had to kind of pull him in and say, wait a second, we're spending more than we should because you're going every day. And he's like, yeah, I kind of noticed that because every day I was, oh, look at this sale. Oh, look at this sale. Well, that's the thing. So you've got to ask yourself, do you have room physically in your place for the stuff? And is there room in your budget for these unplanned purchases? Because, you can have a little, what I'll call your small stock up line item, but you got to be really careful that you can't let a good deal derail your overall budget. And I think that's the key to the whole thing.
It is. I have an idea I want to run past you. So a lot of grocery stores now have a system where you can go online, buy your groceries, and then just go pick them up. I think that might be a good way for somebody that struggles with the impulse buying is you have your list, you sit down at your computer or on your phone, whatever you use, and they make it really like we do that from Walmart and from a local grocery store. But with Walmart, it's got the reorder items.
Yep.
Things that I buy there because they're either cheaper there than they are at the local grocery store, or the local grocery store doesn't have them. And I just literally go into the reorder and reorder this, and we don't need that. We don't need that. And then, hallelujah, they'll deliver it now, which for us is a big deal because it's an hour plus to go pick something up. But for a lot of people, you swing by, you pick it up, and you never have to go into the grocery store and be tempted by all those, croissants or cookies on the end cap or candy bars in the checkout aisle or whatever it is. So I think that might not be a bad thing to do. And it's pretty efficient time wise.
We actually do that every week, my wife and I. My wife handles the grocery, but like just this morning, she said, "What do you need from Walmart this week?" And we'll go on Saturday and pick it up. They already have it nicely bagged up. I make kind of an event. I go get a breakfast sandwich. It's my little treat for myself during the week, and they load it right into the back of the car. The other cool thing they started doing, I had no idea about this, Craig. My wife told me about this the other day. I thought this was brilliant on Walmart's part. And listen, I don't own Walmart stock. I'm not trying to promote Walmart in any way, shape, or form. But she goes, "Ralph, if I go to put it in the cart and they don't have it," she said, "they'll actually ship it to the house for free."
Yeah.
And I was like, that is really classic idea from Walmart, because I got to think from the retail perspective. Yes, it's convenient. Yes, they're probably doing volume, but they are missing out on those sales. Now, I'm not actually the one that goes onto the app. Craig, do they actually do they give you pop-ups like, hey, you might want to consider this, or do they really kind of leave you alone to go through that?
What they do is they will allow you to select substitutes. So you can either get them to substitute the next closest thing, or you can select a substitute, or you can say no substitute if you don't like what they're likely to have as a substitute. Like I have the salad dressing, like I want that salad dressing, that's it. And if you don't have it, I'll get it somewhere else.
Yeah, I was familiar with that. What I was talking about is though when you're actually shopping, when you're going through that, does it give you pop-ups? And I'm thinking like, you don't have the end cap pop-ups when you're not walking through the store. I'm wondering if some marketer hasn't figured it out already that every so often on the app, we're going to pop up, buttery croissants. Or I don't know if it does it or not, but I'm thinking maybe I just made some marketing people some money here.
Yeah. I have not seen that. I mean, it makes recommendations, but I haven't noticed it being intrusive. Sorry, I was on the wrong wavelength.
That's okay.
So now I sounded really smart before, and then I made up for it on that one. So
no, not at all. All right, well, let's shift some gears here. We talked about specific spending habits, but how do we keep all these good intentions and new habits on track consistently? And that's where we talked about our episode, what I'll call episode 121, was a 15-minute money check-in once a week. The idea is to put it on your calendar like any other important appointment. And during this time every week, you review your spending from the past week. You see how it lines up with your budget. You make any necessary adjustments for the week ahead. And more importantly, and I think this is key, Craig, is you celebrate your small wins, or maybe it's a time to make some course corrections. And really, I think the reason you have to do that, the main benefit is it sustains your momentum. It keeps your budget a living document, because a budget isn't meant to be like put into stone like Moses bringing down the 10 Commandments. It's not just something you make once and forget it. And if you're married or partnered, it's a fantastic tool for communication. You can have this, weekly check-in that you're staying on the same page. And this brought a question from a listener named Kevin. So let me get to Kevin's question. And Kevin wrote this. He said, my spouse rolls their, here we go, Craig. My spouse rolls their eyes whenever I mention budgeting or looking at our finances. How can I do a meaningful check-in if they're not interested or even resistant? Kevin, that's a really common and tough situation. I think Craig and I have talked about something very similar on the show the last couple of weeks. When one partner is engaged with the finance and the other isn't, it does create a challenge. Craig, what are your thoughts before we dive into this?
It really is a tough challenge. My advice to Kevin would be, don't fight it, at least not initially. I'm not sure, unless you're in pretty significant dire straits with your finances, it's probably not worth the marital strife to try to push this sort of thing.
Don't they say pick and choose your battles, Craig? I think I've heard that before.
Yeah, if she's not going to go along with it right now, then okay. You still need to communicate, hey, honey, we're spending too much over here, or our vacation fund isn't where we want it to be, or whatever it might be. But I can see getting the eye roll if you said, honey, I've been listening to Ralph and he says we should do this. And so now every Saturday at 10 o'clock, we're going to do a 15-minute, financial check-in, especially given the division of labor in a lot of marriages where it's, okay, so am I going to not do the laundry? Am I going to not do the shopping? Am I going to not take care of the kids? What am I going to not do in this 15 minutes? And so I would tread lightly here.
I got the
That's my
perfect
advice.
solution. Just send them to our website. Just say, honey, listen, there's this guy. He is a genius. You can listen to him every day. Just go listen to his podcast, and then we'll be on the same page. Now, I'm just being funny. But the truth is, I think to really answer the question, you have to admit to one thing. You can only control your own actions and your own attitude. Even if your spouse isn't on board right now, you're doing a solo check-in, that's okay. It's far better that you're at least doing that and somebody's doing it. You can still track your spending you're aware of. You can manage the budget categories you control, and you can monitor progress towards your personal or family goals. And the thing I'm going to say is focus on gentle, and I think, Craig, this is where you were going. Focus on gentle, positive communication rather than that pressure, because the one thing, I don't know about you, Craig, but nagging is not going to help the situation. It's going to end up backfiring. And when you do these check-ins, if there's good news, start off something like, hey, there's great news. We actually came in under budget for groceries this week. And so one of the ways you can sell it is you can say, listen, hey, honey, guess what? I've been really focusing on our budget, and we've got extra money this week. So guess what? You and I are having date night. And then you can say, like, we hit that small savings goal we talked about, and you can share those positive outcomes because, I don't know, I heard one time in management, you always try to build a sandwich. You want to give positive, then fill in the middle with negative, and then go back to positive. And I think that if you can do that in this type of situation, it's going to be better than some lecture. Here you are, professors. You're used to lecturing, right? But if that doesn't work in a relationship, oftentimes, and I think that's where you're going to run into problems. And I think the other takeaway here is model the behavior and model the thing that you want to preach at somebody. Model the behavior. And when your spouse sees you feeling less stressed about money and more in control because of your check-ins, that might pique their interest a little bit. And then the final thing, because I'm a Christian guy, I think you got to pray about this. Pray for unity. Pray for those shared goals in your marriage and ask God to soften each other's hearts and bring both to a place of agreement. Maybe you start off with just something like 5 minutes. Maybe 15 minutes is too much. And like I said, just share one positive thing or one shared goal rather than this whole big budget. It goes on with those baby steps because they can really lead to bigger breakthroughs. They really can.
Well, and I wonder, this may be getting a little bit out there, but I'd want to know why my spouse felt that way. The eye roll could be entirely justified if I'm chasing this thing and then that thing and then some other thing, and then budgeting is just, the thing of the week. And so I think a little honest introspection might be worthwhile too. Is there some reason that your spouse isn't just on board with this? And it could be that she or he just doesn't want any part of it, or it could be something about you and your relationship.
Absolutely. And I think that's why I said, model the behavior that you're looking for. Right. Because your other partner might be like, yeah, I'm rolling my eyes because you're always talking about budgeting, but then you're the first one that wants to go out to eat every night. Or you're the first one that wants to go take these grand vacations, or man, every time there's a new iPhone release, man, you're right there getting it. So, I mean, that's the thing. Like, it's easy to be that lecturer and say, well, why are we doing this and why are we doing that? And like, look in the mirror. I think that's a really key part. Well, next up, we explored a foundational concept for living below your means. And that honestly distinguishing between your true needs and your discretionary wants. And this came up in an episode I did this past week. And the idea is to go through your budget or your spending and label items. I encourage everybody to just do a simple labeling. Needs are generally those things for survival and basic functioning. That's the core housing, the basic food, the essential utilities, essential transportation. And to be honest with you, like I said in the show, Craig, wants are pretty much everything else. Things that improve the quality of life, but aren't strictly necessary for survival. Those are things like entertainment and eating out. And a lot of people would say, listen, the way my wife cooks, we got to eat out every night. Oop, I didn't say that. Anyway, just kidding. But upgrades or most subscriptions, fashion beyond basic clothing. The benefit of this exercise wasn't necessary to eliminate all your wants because, listen, it's your money. Like you said, you're an adult. You have the ability to make decisions. But I wanted to make it crystal clear what things are truly optional, because this empowers you to make intentional choices and identify areas where you could cut back if you needed, if you're having a struggle or you're trying to reach that financial goals. And this led to a thoughtful question from Maria. So let's look at what Maria said. Maria said, the line between needs and wants feels blurry sometimes, Ralph. For example, isn't reliable internet a need for work or school these days, even if it might have felt like a want years ago? Man, I date myself now, Craig. And Maria, you're absolutely right. That line can feel blurry, and I think that's the truth in any of these things. Needs and wants. There's a subtle distinction. I think some things are obvious. And one of the things I mentioned here as we go through this is, society has evolved. I think the argument could be made now: a cell phone is not necessarily a want. It's more of a need. Like, I don't know how many clients of mine don't even have like traditional, what we'll call like landlines. I think we call them like a smartphone. It could be, maybe you need that for your job, or, it could be a want for somebody else. Craig, what do you think? Have you ever battled with this whole needs versus want blurriness?
Well, yes, but to go back to your point, we could not get a landline phone when we moved to Louisiana. It just was impossible to get. So, so I think sometimes we have needs and we have wants, and it's really absolute need this to survive. And you can't really see my hands here. And this is absolutely discretionary. And so things fall somewhere along that continuum. And I think we need to acknowledge that. So would the world end if you didn't have internet? No, in fact, a lot of our students, when COVID hit, they would go sit outside of McDonald's, or some of them would sit in the parking lot on campus, because we have a lot of students that, like me, lived in rural areas, couldn't get reliable internet. So is it absolutely a requirement? No, but it's pretty far towards that requirement end of the continuum. I'm wearing some boots. I've got a brand of boots I really like, and I really want. They've got this new like Cayman or something like that, lizard skin boot that I really want. That's pretty far over here into the want, because I don't need another pair of boots. And so I think you have to have a little bit of discretion about that needs and wants. And one more thing, that could vary. So what might be a need for you might be a want for me, or vice versa. So your point here, and you said this, but I want to reinforce it, is to think about this stuff so you can be more intentional. Really think, is this thing truly something I need? And then I think one way to get at that is to ask yourself, what if I didn't have it? What would life look like if I didn't have it?
Yeah, and more directly to, I think it's Maria. Maria's question is, yes, I think you can argue that in most modern day households, internet is important, but do you need premium gigabit speed? Do you need to have this huge bandwidth with all the bells and whistles? That extra cost for premium, that definitely, I think, falls into the one category. Now, Craig, for you and I who do content creation, and we're big in bringing big files down, we're doing live shows and all that kind of stuff, well, that gigabit might make the most sense for us. And that must have been a struggle for you out in the middle of, I want to say out in the middle of nowhere, Louisiana, but man, that had to have been interesting.
It was. In fact, I got special dispensation to come to campus during COVID. Campus was shut down. We weren't supposed to be in the buildings, but I could not teach online with what we had before Starlink. But it really does vary. And I think I'm a little hesitant to ask this, but I'm going to do it anyway. Do you think you can go too far with this? Like, I don't need the level of fiber. We just got fiber. I don't need the level of fiber speed that I got. But you know what? For $20 a month, it makes me happy. And for $20 a month, my financial situation, that's pretty cheap to feel happy. So I think you can go too far with this in the extreme.
Well, yeah, and I think it depends. I think it depends on your situation. If you're having a hard time making your mortgage payment and you're trying to decide, do I get the fiber line? Or, right. One of the things I was going to mention here is, a basic car to get to work, if public transportation isn't an option, that's not an option. That's a need. Like for you, I'm assuming you don't have a train line that comes to your house. You don't have a bus route that comes to your house. Now, maybe you do, but
not unless I hobo it and catch the freighter that comes by. But
but that's all relative. But a brand new luxury SUV with a hefty payment, that's definitely a luxury. Right. Simple, nutritious groceries, that's a need. Daily gourmet meals, expensive organic only items when not medically necessary, or frequent restaurant dinners, those are one. So I think it's a continuum, Craig.
Right.
It's a continuum, but it requires ruthless honesty. And that's really what I was trying to get at in that episode. Ruthless honesty with yourself, because the thing is, it's really easy to argue the other side of that. It's real easy to say, well, yes, I need 15 subscription services for streaming TV because there's nothing to watch here. Do you really need 10 of them?
Are you hearing your mom echoing around in your brain?
Always.
How many times when you were a kid did you say, I need this toy? No, you don't. You want this toy. That's a different thing.
Yeah, and I think really what it comes down to, I put some notes here, is that, I think a want is primarily for comfort. It's for convenience, it's for entertainment, or dare I say status. You get the simple F-150 pickup truck, right? That's great. It does what it needs to do. It has, it has the functions, but man, do you really need the 250, the dual axle? Now, again, if you're hauling a horse trailer behind it, then you need to have the 3-point hitch thing in the back. I think I said that right. It just depends on what you're doing.
Right.
The core function is the need. The upgrades are the extras. That's usually the one. And that's a great discussion to have if you're partnered with somebody too, because, your perception of a need and your spouse or your partner's perception of a need could be totally different. And that's another one of these things where you may have to have that discussion. What do needs and wants look like? The thing is, and we mention on the show all the time, Craig, in this country, most of us have the benefit of being able to feed our wants. We really do. We're not wondering, we're not eating rice and beans because that's the only thing we have. Some of us might love rice and beans, like, oh, this is fantastic. I want to eat this every day. Like you said, you eat yogurt and granola. Well, you could eat other things, but that's your choice, right? But it all comes down to what you need and what you want. That's really what it comes down to. You didn't start your business to get rich overnight. You didn't expect it to be easy, but you also probably didn't expect it to feel this hard either. The long hours, the late nights staring at the numbers, the pressure to keep it all together while wondering if you're doing something wrong. Yeah, I've been there too. I'm Ralph Estep Jr., and after 30 years of running businesses, coaching entrepreneurs, and walking through fire with clients, I can tell you this. Most of the people you admire didn't skip the hard parts. They survived them. They grew through them, and that's what this show is all about. Welcome to Grit and Growth Business, a podcast for small business owners who build it from scratch. No trust funds here, no startup hype. Just you, your vision, and the daily grind of keeping it alive. Every week we get real. We'll break down the stuff that no one talks about. How to pay yourself, how to price your work with confidence, how to grow without burning out, and how to build a business that actually supports your life, not just drains it. This isn't about chasing hacks or hype. It's about building on purpose, with strategy, with grit, and with a little help from someone who's done it the hard way. So if you're a small business owner who's tired of pretending everything's fine, if you're craving honest insight from someone who's been there where you are, then this show is for you. Visit gritandgrowthbusiness.com to learn more, get free resources, and sign up for our newsletter if you're ready to go deeper. This is Grit and Growth Business, strategies that grow businesses, and we're just getting started. And finally, in the last episode of the week, we zoomed in on that one common want that often adds up to a surprising amount. This I'm getting a lot of people in trouble here. That daily bought coffee or specialty tea. And the solution we tried, and I gave everybody a challenge, Craig. I said, I want to give you the 30-day challenge to brew your coffee or tea at home instead. And the reason I did that, I said, I want you to sit back and really calculate your potential savings, because it can be anywhere from $50, $100, or even $150 a month for some people that get those, I don't know, when they go to Starbucks, it's like a 15 words. I don't know how they remember all that stuff. Like, how do you, I'm a deb. I'm like, what in the world did that person just say? I've only been there a few times, right? But I go in there and it's like, and I don't know how the person behind the counter figures it out. I want this, then a bop, and it's like
half soy latte with oat milk, and
yeah, it's like, what are you doing? But I said, commit to making that change for a month, because the benefit isn't just significant cash saved. It's also a powerful demonstration of how small, consistent changes in daily habits can have a massive cumulative impact, because it builds that discipline muscle. And we got a question on this from David. Let's see what David had to say for us. It says, I mostly drink the free coffee at my workplace, which is great. but I still find myself buying a fancy latte from the coffee shop downstairs once or twice a week as a treat. Does that habit still count as something I should try to cut for this challenge? All right, here's my answer to David. It depends. It depends on your situation. Now, if you want to truly do the 30-day challenge that we talked about, it's all about breaking daily expensive habits that are significant budget leaks. And if you've already taken advantage of free coffee at work, then you've already done it. You're already way ahead of the game. I'm talking about people who are, it's funny. My youngest son was telling me about this, Craig. I had no idea about this. He went to a private Christian school, and he said, Dad, he says, I don't know why I remember this. We were talking about this show, I think, that I was recording. And he said, the girls at school used to bring in Starbucks cups. And I was like, in high school? He's like, yeah. He said, but here's the funny thing, Dad. Most of them didn't even have Starbucks in them. He said they just wanted that status of the cup. So that's really what I was getting at is, why are you doing it? I don't drink coffee. I come over to the office in the morning. I have one of those, Keurigs, right? And I put the little pod in there and I make myself a hot tea. So for me, this wasn't a big deal. But Craig, what are you thinking about this?
Well, so I would encourage David to try it for a week or two, because you may find that the latte is really not the big deal. It seems like they're terrible for you to begin with. So maybe you won't miss it. But if you find that you really miss that latte on Friday mornings or to get you started on Monday or whatever, then buy it. But I mean, David's only getting it once or twice a week, so it probably is a treat. But these people that are buying, that sounds so terrible, but people who are buying the fancy whatever every day, it's not a treat anymore. It's not special. Like I eat one sausage, egg, and cheese biscuit every week. It's on Thursdays. That's a big deal for me. And I eat one cinnamon scone a week. I don't like missing that scone. But if I ate a scone every day, then it's just breakfast. It's just kind of something that's there every day. So I think if you do something over and over and over again, it loses that treat. It's not a treat anymore. But to David, I would say try it for a week. You may find that you miss it. You may not. If you really miss it, then have it on Monday, Friday, Wednesday, whenever you want. But you may just not miss it at all. You'd be proud of me, Ralph. Guess what I paid for my coffee this morning?
Nothing.
$1.11.
$1.11. That's perfect.
Yeah, well, I don't know that I can make it much cheaper than that, frankly. Maybe a little bit. But
And that's a whole point, isn't it?
Yep.
And that's where, David, my answer is kind of twofold. Number one thing, if you have it in your budget to do this a couple times a week, I'm not going to be standing in the way of doing that. But I think the thing you're really alluding to, Craig, is why are people doing this? Is it that social connection? Is it that habit? Is that response to stress or boredom? Or, are you buying it because, hey, that's my one treat to myself? Hey, listen, we all work hard. Most of us work hard. I'll say that. If that's your treat to yourself, great. It's better than smoking crack or doing heroin or something like that. I mean, that sounds ridiculous, but you know what I'm saying, Craig? If that's your vice, and you're mindful about budgeting and it brings you joy and it's not compromising your bigger financial goals, then doing it a couple times a week, what's the big deal?
Well, but you hit on the really key word. I'm going to lay a quote on you. I think it's Woodrow Wilson. Habit rules the unreflecting herd. And so what that basically means is that if you're just being guided by habit, you're on autopilot. You're not really being intentional. You're not really being thoughtful about anything. And so if David, after trying it for a week or two, decides, I really like that latte to get my week started. Or, I go down and my coworkers and I go down and we sit for a little while and chat about the week that's just been. And then it's not habit anymore. You've kind of broken that habit. You've made an intentional decision. You've reflected on it. You want to do it. Doesn't hurt your budget. Go for it. You get to do what you want. But if it's just habit, you're giving up control.
Yeah, and I think what you're really talking about is conscious versus unconscious decisions, Craig. And I think you're right. I think so many people, was it Marx that said that, I think he talked about religion as the opiate of the masses, because are people really thinking through it? And that's what I think the problem is with these type of, I'll call them trendy things, Are you doing it because of, well, I went to Starbucks, and we're picking on Starbucks. There's a lot of other ones, Dunkin' Donuts. I mean, you can name a bunch of them.
I'm a little concerned that I quoted a U.S. president and you quoted Karl Marx. I don't know what to think about that.
Hey, listen,
That's a beard stroker there. I might have to stroke my beard and ponder that one.
but I'm just saying, like, it's so
No,
easy
you're
to
right.
get, no, but it's so easy to get caught up in the unconscious. And that was the whole reason that I made the challenge is I wanted people to think about it. Challenge
Right.
your thoughts. Are you doing it because it's a genuine, I love this. Like one of the things my wife says to me, she goes, Ralph, we eat out all the time. And she says, is my food no good? I was like, oh boy, I stepped in it on that one. My wife is a great cook. And I thought about it, and I really, and for me, it was the socialization of it. It was the going, because I have my office here on the farm. I live here on the farm. Like there are days, Craig, or I say several days when I don't leave. I call it the compound. And for me, going out to dinner was kind of like an escape. It was like, hey, they let me out. Like some days I feel like I'm in prison, like I'm at the prison camp, right? It's like, oh, he can go out today. For me, it wasn't about the food so much. It wasn't about what they were serving. It was just the idea of the socialization. It was getting out to talking to other people and all that kind of stuff. But again, I looked at my finances. It's in alignment with my financial plans. And it's not a unconscious habit. I'm not doing it because somebody is leading me to do it. It's not some subliminal advertising that says go do this and this because all the cool kids are doing it.
No, the juice is worth the squeeze for you when it comes to going out periodically. So yeah, that idea of intentionality, I think is an undercurrent for all of this.
So, Craig, any big takeaways on what we talked about today as we talked about, how to, the whole point of this 30-day series I'm in on the show was, the joy of living below your means. I'm really trying to show people that restriction isn't a dirty word. There are benefits to doing it. And I'm just picking little one thing at a time and saying, hey, focus on this. Like, this week as I'm recording shows, we're talking about some other things that we can do. We're talking about buying, things that, you can find sales on. We're shop at home, borrow and barter and all those kind of things. Any big takeaways that you feel, Craig?
Yeah, I want to circle back to something that you said early on, and that's give yourself some grace. This is a journey, and you're going to have some wins and you're going to have some losses. You're going to do some great things and you're going to make some mistakes. If you get down on yourself when you make mistakes, you're going to stop doing it because that's unpleasant. If you just practice a little self-grace and say, you know what? I bought that candy bar and I probably shouldn't have. Well, then don't buy it next time. Don't beat yourself up over it. You bought the candy bar, that's gone. Can't do anything about that. Just maybe, use the way you felt to trigger you to not buy it next time. But if you beat yourself up, you will absolutely stop doing this.
Yeah, and that's why the overall theme of my show is, how to break the cycle, that cycle of financial shame with confidence. I'm trying to build confidence. And all of these things have in common something. They're about moving from being reactive with our money to being proactive and being intentional. In their practical ways, we live out our calling as good stewards of the resources God has given us. These aren't just about numbers. They're about creating peace and reducing stress and freeing up resources so we can live more generously and pursue purposes God has for us. And you got to remember, the theme of our series, like I said, the joy of living below your means, that joy comes from this intentionality. That's the alignment of our faith and our finances. So my encouragement to you today as you head into the rest of your week, pick just one of these areas that we talked about today. Maybe the one that sparked a new idea or felt like a particular challenge, and commit to focusing in on it. Because small steps consistently taken, they lead to big changes. So, Craig, thanks for joining me, and thanks everybody for joining me today. It's a privilege to walk this journey with you. It's great to have you every week here with me, Craig. We have some great conversations, and keep those questions coming. You can visit us. Now, we've got a new website. You can still get to us by going to the old website, but as we rebrand, our new website is financiallyconfidentchristian.com. You can submit your questions there. You can find all of our shows and resources there. And I want to encourage everybody to share this podcast, share the show with someone you think might benefit. So, Craig, I'd like to close in prayer if that's okay with you. Father God, thank you for your wisdom that guides us in all areas of our life, including our finances. Lord, we pray for everyone listening, that you would give them clarity, that you would give them discipline, and give them courage to implement these practical steps. Help us all to be faithful stewards, finding joy and peace, not in abundance of things, but in a right relationship with you and with the resources you provide us. Give us the strength for the journey and grace when we stumble. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, thanks again for tuning in. God bless you. And I'll talk to you next week on our weekly episode. You can join me every day on Ask Ralph. So again, Craig, take care and God bless everybody. Everybody have a great day today.
Thank you for joining us on the Ask Ralph Show. And with a simple click to subscribe, we'll invite you back to our next episode. And remember, financial issues don't have to be complicated. Just ask Ralph. The information contained in this episode of Ask Ralph is based on data available as of the date of its release. Saggio Accounting Plus and Ask Ralph Media, Inc. is under no obligation to update this content if changes occur. Applying this information to your specific situation requires careful consideration of all facts and circumstances, and any information provided is not to be considered as financial, tax, or legal advice. Please consult your tax advisor or attorney before acting on any material covered.